Yeah, this is sort of part two, at least for my talks. Uh, we we came up with we were looking at the Dark Knight just in abstract last time. Following up from Deb Ackerson's great talk on depression, that kind of deep darkness that can last for decades, a whole life. Hopefully not, but can last a long time and definitely can block out the love light. Uh, and I mentioned last time that I'd been in a couple phases of my life of 50 years of sitting and doing this consciously. I've been into a couple of periods of maybe somewhere between 15 and 20% of these 50 years in a kind of dark night of the senses and the soul and the spirit. I find it a little hard to see where one ends and the other begins, but some real darkness. And the question that really, to piggyback off last week, the question that came up that I think is just terrifically helpful, and it comes up in the dark nights if you're lucky enough to hear it. And it took me two dark nights to actually hear this question, to be honest. Slow learner, maybe. But what gets in the way? The question is, what gets in the way of our innate capacity to receive and give love? And to make it personal, what gets in the way of my innate capacity to receive and give love? So I'm going to talk about that today, just to make it a little more specific, and hopefully it will help you. Because if you're a part of this community and you're going to hang around for a while, some of you have been here 4 years, we're definitely on a conscious uh, spiritual journey, interspiritual spiritual journey, and you will, if you're lucky enough, hit the dark nights, and you learn a lot. And so I'm going to sort of talk about what I learned about this. So I'm going to put the screensaver up here for a minute for those people listening on tape, or maybe you came in late. I'm looking for it here. Hard to find sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, this is move this up a little bit. This is the screensaver we had. And the title today, I think it's a little long to put on YouTube, but what we're talking about is one love, two breakdowns, three marriages, and four vows. And really, everything I'm going to say about this, definitely from my own perspective, Pam did 20 minutes on this. It might be quite different, but that was our wedding day on the left. And then last year at a Monet thing in Cincinnati, we had the backdrop for that. Yeah. And then the part of a poem I wrote a while back. We're born in great mystery. We live in great mystery. We die in great mystery. And we either love in great mystery or we don't love at all. I really think that's true. So the one thing I know for sure is that we're in the midst of a great mystery here called human life, and we either love in great mystery or we don't love at all. So what I say today is just sort of what I learned in this great mystery of now. It's 59 years that we've been together. We start dating in our junior year of high school, and we've had our ups and downs, but next year we'll have been together 60 years. Yeah, so I think that's enough just to give you the flavor of that, and then we'll dive into the material. Yeah. When we talk about what gets in the way of our innate capacity, and innate is important there, I think, because it means we all have it. I don't care who you are, death row, serial killer, uh, you know, it doesn't matter. We all have an innate capacity to receive and give love. For some people, you may go lifetimes without ever tapping that, and that's what it takes, it's what it takes. We have eternity to actually tap into. I just wrote to my brother-in-law, Jim, uh, today, and I said, I said, every day, what a gift to receive and give love. That's If there's anything else that's important, I don't know what it is. And he's doing his best. He's doing his best. Now, love is a tricky word. You can tell what cultures, how a culture values uh, an experience by how many words they have for it. For instance, the Greeks had several words for love, each with sort of nuanced meanings. I'll just give you the big five. Eros, which is a kind of romantic, passionate love. Philia, affectionate, brotherly love, sisterly love. Storge, familial love. Pragma, which a lot of people don't really understand. Pragma is an enduring, committed love. And then agape is unconditional love. That's the actual Greek word that's used in the uh, Greek Gospels that were written when Jesus said God is love. He was talking about unconditional love, agape, and that's the Greek word for it. There's other kinds of love too. They really get into it. They even consider uh, uh, flirting. They have a word for flirting, because there's all kinds of shades of love, and I think that's really great. We just have this one word, which is pretty primitive. Eskimos have 54 words for snow. Polynesian people have almost as many words for water and waves. They take it seriously. You wonder how seriously in our culture we take love. All we think of is romantic rom-coms and stuff. Well, all right. Let's start with one love. Like I said, Pam and I have spanned from 1966 to now, 2025, 59 years together. Uh, we got married. That picture on the left that we saw on August 8th, 1971, priest in my local church in Illinois. Uh, we spent a year in Dublin. The day after we got married, we flew to Dublin. I was starting my graduate work, and the draft was after me as well. And so that was an interesting year. Got a master's in a year. We lived there. Just was a precious year. When we had fights, Pam couldn't go home to her mother. She went to the church across the street. But it was a good year. And then when we came back, talk about uh, mystery. I got a job. Start teaching in Houston at a all boys Catholic school, football school, and so we spent the next 10 years in Houston. And it was during that towards the end of that period that really, I guess. Year 9, 10, 11, that kind of thing, that we had our first real breakdown or dark night. A lot of times dark nights, at least mine anyway, involved a lot of change in a small period of time. I mean, countries can go through dark nights. I think we're into one now. And it's good to know that out of the dark night, there's something new can come out of it. And that's the hope I hold for our own country. But during the end part from 78 to 82 is when things really broke down. Uh, but there was 2 trips to Gethsemane during that time. I brought high school guys to Gethsemane, to Merton's monastery. Uh, they'd never done that before or after. That might say something about what they thought of our trip, but it was life changing. And I met my spiritual director, Father Gregory, there, and he was my spiritual director for the next 18 years. Uh, yeah, we were just falling apart, moving apart. A lot of stuff was going on, and one day, Pam swung her purse at me, and she had a hell of a purse at that time, and I ducked. I'm glad to say, but then we both broke down into tears and hugged, and we were broken. Um, and so this first breakdown and breakthrough, I've got to give props to our therapist. We didn't really have any money to get a I didn't think to get a serious therapist, so we went to Catholic Charities where they would do it on a sliding scale. And I had a choice between a priest and a nun, and I thought, at that time I thought, well, nuns are hipper. I don't want some damn priest telling me. So we got Sister Katrina, who was a Dominican sister, and she was tough. For one thing, she saw through my whole line of bullshit and didn't mind telling me about it. And so I would say it was like 6 months of tsunamis of emotion. At first, a lot by Pam, and then when I got hit between my eyes with a 2x4 by the therapist, me too. It was really 6 months of hell, uh, and so bad that I really had to move out of the house and was camping out at school and hanging out at bookstores a lot because I was just living in my office, and so at night I go to a nice bookstore by Rice University and read books, which there was a little bit of light there that I didn't realize how much light that would be because just one day I was just walking through the bookshelves, getting ready to get a cup of coffee and spend, until they closed down three. It's back when they had bookstores with nice chairs, and I just would walk down the shelves and pick a book out and then settle down with a cup of coffee and read for 3 hours. And I picked out a book. Now, this is Grace. Grace is playing into this whole thing, not a person, but just this kind of love light that is constantly available. I picked a book that said Discovering the Enneagram, and it had Rohr on the bottom, Rohr, Richard Rohr. I didn't know who he was. And the Enneagram is a Greek word. I had no idea what that meant. Why did I pick that book? Well, anyway, that was the first bit of Grace. Uh, and light energy started to come in as soon as I opened up to the first page there and started reading about the number one. Yeah, gave me some leverage. We got through this dark night eventually, and we were so talk about the light and energy that came through by going through hell and coming out the other side. We just decided we didn't want to live in Houston anymore. And I'd been up to the monastery here in Kentucky, and Pam and I came up and I showed it to her, and we decided we're going to move here. So we both quit our jobs. She was teaching at the high school by the time. We both quit our jobs, and I remember the priest who was the principal at the time. He didn't particularly care for my kind of teaching. He said, uh, he said, "Do you have a job?" He thought a local school had snapped me up, and I said, "No, I don't have a job." And Pam didn't have a job either. And he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're going to Kentucky." He said, "You're going to become a monk?" I said, "No, Father, I'm married." And he said, "Oh, he couldn't understand it. A lot of people couldn't understand it. My parents couldn't understand it, but we just packed up everything, sold our house, and moved up here to Bardstown. Not this place. Took a while to find this place, and we got jobs mysteriously. They hired me again, and they hired Pam too. And so this was when I had my second marriage. I every once in a while I'll tell people I've been married 3 times to the same woman. Pam doesn't. She doesn't hold that view, but I do. And the second marriage was, if you've ever been to Gethsemane, they have a garden where there's a weeping Christ, a big statue, and got married there by Father Gregory, my spiritual director. Aaron was 3 years old in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so that was our second marriage. And now it went on for a while. And then I want to talk about another sort of serious like love that came up in 95, being around Gethsemane, reading more Merton, understanding contemplative Christianity, which I had no view of growing up as a Catholic, that there was a contemplative thing. All of a sudden, there was a contemplative form of meditation called centering prayer. Thomas Keating was the real architect of that. And so one thing led to another. Again, there's a lot of grace in all this. In 95, I took 10 days off of school or took 2 weeks off of school and drove up to St. Benedict's Monastery in Snowmass in Colorado. and sat with Thomas Keating for 10 days in a centering prayer intensive. Now, what he was introducing and what he took over, my next therapist is what he calls the divine therapist. Sit this kind of sitting, you're with the divine, and therapy is happening. And boy, it really did. While it's happening, you don't really even know it. Much different than being in person therapist, but the divine works with you when you sit this way. Even if you're sitting in any kind of meditation, the divine is working with you, even though you don't feel it, you don't know it, and plus you don't have to pay for it. It's free, which was great. But I realized over time that the dark night, the first one, the dark night of the senses, they call it. You start to get in touch with uh, uh, what's in your unconscious, and that's anger, shame, and fear. Those are the three big ones. And boy, I was out of touch with all three of them uh, when I started in '95. That's 30 years ago, I guess. Um, and underneath those primary, like the holy trinity of darkness that shield everything out. Underneath the anger, shame, and fear was a lot of hurt and trauma from this life or perhaps previous lives. I'm still plumbing it. Uh, not to the end of it, I'm sure. But, there's a lot of frozen emotion, pain, the orphan parts of yourself that in these 30 years of doing this kind of sitting, they have come forth. I've been able to find parts of myself that had to get split off to survive. And all of us, all the pain, all the emotion, the pain, the orphan parts of yourself, they're blocking the grace light of and the love. Uh, so I really, this was a great find, and grace will lead you if you're somewhat open to it. And the first breakdown opened me up in a way to uh, realizing that I didn't have everything under control. I discovered during this time Aramaic, and I studied Aramaic Jesus for a couple of years. So again, there's a lot going on. Uh, the one great line from the Gospel of Thomas, where he it's which is was in Aramaic, and Jesus's name was Yeshua there because that was his actual Aramaic name. Jesus is the Greek for that. These two lines changed my life, and I've been living based on them ever since. Jesus said to Thomas, well, Thomas is the only one who reports this in all the 50 some gospels. Jesus said, Thomas, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. What you bring forth will save you. But if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And that's, 2,000 years between before Freud and Jung, in the beginning of the 20th century, was bringing in depth therapy, psychology, and the whole idea is to bring forth what is within you, mostly what's in your unconscious. And if you can bring it forth, that's a kind of salvation, although it feels like hell and scares you. So this divine therapy that via this kind of meditation, really any kind of meditation that you're doing is possible. It allows for a kind of to somehow bring this stuff up slowly, as opposed to taking an acid trip, which if you have a bad trip, it all comes up all at once, and who can deal with that? But it brings it up slowly, and you learn how to embrace it, and then hold it until it heals, and then release the whole thing. It's lovely. Kind of encounter it in the sitting. You feel it. You feel the anger. You feel the shame. You feel the fear. You hold it in your heart. You embrace it, and then when the healing's done, you can release it. Uh, I think this is my view of it anyway. That this kind of sitting and this kind of divine therapy is the practice of self compassion, which I didn't have. I had compassion for other people, always, but compassion for myself, not so much. It is the practice of self compassion at its best. It's done with the support of a spiritual friend. I have had, after Gregory had other spiritual friends that worked with me. And if you're lucky, it's best done in a beloved community, which mysteriously, graciously, we have here. So the best community I've ever been in. It has healed me more than any other community I've been in. Well, so I had that going, but then there was just a lot of other stuff happening. My parents both went off the edge of dementia at the same time. We decided to take them in. Pam agreed to that. What grace was there? Neither of my sisters could, and brother or my brother had a. They all had spouses, and that was a no go. But Pam said, "Tells you a lot about Pam." She said, let's take them in. So we built a house adjacent to where I am now, connected, and we took them in for 7 years. Uh, they're both their deaths in the house. The death of Father Gregory died right in the middle of that too in the year 2000. So I lost my mother, my father, my spiritual father. Uh, Education had been changing, and so I left the classroom at age 52. Didn't know what I was going to do. Sitting right here, pretty much on a cushion though, not on a chair. I just decided, well, I could create a space for grace right here and have retreats here instead of being on the road. So there was a lot going on, and uh, but yet, there was a lot unhealed too at that time. Even though I had, been doing divine therapy, doing century prayer for 5 years when this dark period started, there just was so much going on, which oftentimes will be what will trigger a dark night. And Saint Augustine, who was a wild man, before he made the turn, he wrote in his confessions. He said, "Oh God, please save me from these sexual excesses, but not yet." And and there is that, like I was, I guess, finally ready to get serious about working what gets in the way of real love. Even though we had that breakdown, um, I still didn't see that it was, my 50% of it was what was getting in the way. And for me, just in short, every relationship it's a 50-50 deal, and Pam's things are different, but we're all hustling for worthiness. It's just what are we doing to get it? For me, it was being perfect, perfectionism, workaholism, kind of arrogance and judgment that comes with that. The Enneagram can show you what's in the way. It doesn't show you who you are. I mean, I'm not a one, you're not a number, but it shows you the things that are getting in the way: perfectionism, workaholism, arrogance, judgment. Oh my gosh. And then, in terms of how we view love in this culture, we've got a kind of goofy idea that there's a missing piece out there that if when you find it, then you're whole, or even a more pernicious term, there you have a soulmate, and that comes into it. Uh, it took me trying that and finding out that it was rubbish. The, they don't have a word for that in Greek because they knew your own soul was your mate. All right, your own soul is your mate. Yeah, and that's so all of those things got in the way during that time, and then uh, broke down. Uh, and now I'll read you, just as we end here. I'll read you a couple poems I wrote. Oh, these were written about 10 years ago when it thing broke down again. Uh, this one is it's an amazing poem for me. One day, Pam just sat down in the old green chair and said no. She just said no to the way we were living and to what we were becoming. Now I call it affectionately her ex cathedra moment. That's a term Catholics know about, where the Pope speaks from the chair, and it's absolute truth. Now I affectionately call it her ex cathedra moment. But back then, in that moment, the whole house shook. Republican wisdom says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But Buddhist wisdom says, if it is broke, don't fix it. I guess we had just run out of duct tape, or more accurately, Pam had run out of the willingness to keep duct taping our marriage together. Sometimes you have to say a necessary no to how you're living before you can say an essential yes to what you need your life to become. I just call that ex cathedra. And then we got married for the third time in August 2015. Uh, and we married ourselves. We just joined hands and uh, recited the vows that we wrote in the process. And it was more tumultuous, than even the first one. But we came out the other side and we wrote these vows. And I'm going to leave you with these vows here. Uh, and we couldn't even remember the vows we said either the previous two things. And vows are not like commandments. They are more like lighthouses. It's easy to get in a relationship that goes on a long time. It's easy to lose your way. It's foggy, stormy. You don't know where the hell you're going. And so these vows are more like lighthouses. And we wrote them together. And I say the first and the third one. And Pam says the second and the fourth. So these are the four vows. And normally we say them at breakfast if we're lucky enough to be eating together on a given day. And we join hands and I start out today. We vow to remember that we are married by an eternal conversation with God and each other. And then Pam will say, we vow to listen deeply to what is being spoken in our heart of hearts. And then I'll say, we vow to remember that our marriage is strengthened by telling the truth. And then she says the last vow as, and we vow to walk life's road together through all the bitter and the sweet, come what may, and always hand in hand. So, that's what I learned and how I learned it. But for anybody, if you're on a conscious spiritual journey, especially a meditative one where this stuff is given space to come up, day by day with great patience, you can clear out what gets in the way. And then once you start to get a little daylight, finding, integrating, and living from the heart of your true nature is where you're headed. Finding, integrating, and living from the heart of your true nature becomes the journey. But it takes a while to clear it to where you can even see, oh yeah, there's something deeper than all this. And I think that's the ball game. Well, anyway, hopefully that was helpful for you in some way. All right, so.